All right, 3, 2, 1, then we'll get into it. David, great to see you. Welcome back. This is not our regular monthly. This is something new, something different.
It's an annual look at the
That's
business.
the word. That's the word. Yes.
Or 2 or 3 words.
Yeah. It is the 2023 eGrocery Performance Benchmarking debut. So happy to have you here. We're going to have very high level, maybe get into some specifics, some nuggets that you may have uncovered. Before we get into it, can you just share very briefly, what is the eGrocery Performance Benchmark?
Sure. It's one of the many eGrocery initiatives we have here at Brick Meets Click, and this one in particular focuses on understanding specifically the performance of regional grocers' first-party e-commerce site. And it complements really the view that we get from our monthly, which is a more holistic view of the households. And when we look at market share, it's important to recognize that in a global view, supermarkets or regional grocers represent around 27, 28% of the total e-grocery market. Mm-hmm. This benchmarking report is exclusively focused on that slice of the pie.
Awesome. And let me ask you, how many retailers participated?
We had 25 grocery banners participate this year.
Across the U.S.?
Across the U.S., and the primary condition was they had to have operated a first-party e-commerce site or app for the duration of the 12-week period during 2023.
Very good. So appreciate you giving us that overview. What is the key message that you're taking away from this right now?
The headline is, it's a game of retention now, right? Obviously, the business has slowed considerably for the regional grocers, and we can talk about that. But what the analysis lays bare is, we have to invest more resources or allocate more resources to improving the engagement of our existing customers, full stop. It's clear that that's probably the single largest challenge. How we address it is going to be unique depending on who we are and where we're at in our development of our eGrocery strategy.
Name of the game, retention. Can you comment on what you're seeing in some of the strategies that at least have been employed during the period that the study looked at?
Yeah, so the key ones that we identified this year would be, looking at the availability of both services on first party. So do you have both pickup and delivery available to the customers that you're serving in your respective markets? I mean, that still is a kind of the baseline for getting in the business. We still have significant opportunity gaps, especially with the availability of pickup, to improve, engagement. I think beyond that, what we can see is that there are probably a range of tactics that we can explore and test and better implement and leverage that kind of increases the stickiness of that engagement, right? That motivates someone to either place another item in the cart or motivates them to make another order, right?
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the big picture of that. And again, we have a really diverse range of banners. We have at least one banner that has only presence on their first-party e-commerce site or mobile app, whereas the majority of them have both presence on first-party and third-party marketplaces. However, there are key differences between banners within that second group, and that's primarily driven by who their first-party provider is and how that may be influencing, the tactics that we're observing or the results that we're measuring across those banners.
And by third-party providers, you're talking Instacart, DoorDash.
Third-party provider marketplaces, yeah, those. But when it comes to who the first-party provider is, that could include Mercatus, it could include Instacart, and it could include many others. That's the distinction we mean relative to the differences we're seeing within the subset of first-party retailers who are present both in first-party and third-party. That the break within that group is largely visible based on whether they are or are not supported by Instacart on the first party as well.
Got it. So you mentioned basket, you mentioned frequency. What other metrics did you look at in this study?
Well, I mean, we look at a range of them, but if we start with decomposing sales, obviously sales are a function of how much someone spends and how many orders there are. When we get into how many orders there are, it's going to get into things like how often, or order frequency, how often someone is purchasing during a set period of time, as well as how many customers there are. What we found when we went through that decomposition is, average order values, they increased, around the rate of inflation, but they went up. Order frequency for those that were active, actually, on a same-store basis, they went up. What went down on the same-store basis was customers, right? So really, we just had less customers using our site this year. So when we look at that in the context of how do we focus on retention, we could look at distribution of order frequency. 60% of the customers that were active during the most recent 4-week period were averaging one order per 4 weeks, right? We only had 20% of those customers making 2 orders during that, leaving the balance placing 3 or more. So when you look at just the 20% sitting in the 2 orders per 4-week period, the question is, how can we entice them to make one more order, right? And that's where the potential role of subscriptions or memberships could have a play on it. And the same thing when you look at AOV, we can see that, AOV from, a cohort analysis based on when they were born as customers for that retailer, that spend continues to go up. So the question is, well, how do we improve that element of the process? And again, there's a lot of aspects of personalization that technology can leverage to enhance the experience, whether it's with more digital deals or better list building or recommendation engines, things of that sort.
And I agree entirely. I mean, it's the application of means to improve the customer experience and to identify, or at least communicate to the customer that you know who they are and you know what their preferences are, and encourage them to come back because they feel like they have at least a digital relationship with the retailer.
Right.
Devil's advocate. So the decline in sales do you think there's a commensurate increase in store, or is there leakage to other retailer that maybe wasn't part of the study?
I think holistically, the regional grocer group or channel or format, however you want to say it, has been challenged by the broader macroeconomics that households are facing today. While inflation is abating, the cumulative effects that they've had on disposable income continue to cause somewhat of a cash crunch or a flight to value. And that's really benefiting the value players out there, folks like Walmart and Aldi in particular. So I think whether you're talking online or in store, some of these trends directionally are probably going in the same direction, unfortunately.
You mentioned long-term customer value. I mean, the report mentions that new customers are less likely to reach the value level of long-term customers. What strategies are suggested for converting those new customers into long-term high-value customers?
Well, before we jump into that, I think it's probably beneficial to highlight that if you look at someone who starts today, born this period, and then ages to at least 14 months, which is the oldest kind of cohort that we're measuring in the year over year, only 1 out of every 3 customers are likely to make it there. right? And when you think about that, and then you consider the implications of losing one of your oldest, long-standing customers,
Mhm.
it takes conservatively 2.5 new customers to replace them, and more likely 3.5 based on that retention curve. So it just amplifies the importance of not giving those customers that you've already captured and been engaging a reason to leave, right? So it's about not disappointing them. So really the strategies are to not give them reasons to consider alternative options. So, if we look at that from a very practical standpoint, it's really looking at the last leg of the user experience, which is what we define as the distribution phase, which is providing the order to the customer either at the transfer point in the parking lot or at the store or at the home. And so things like providing better fill rates for your orders. If an item's out of stock, at minimum you have an acceptable substitution that's being offered in replacement of that item. It's also around those wait times, and the wait times, again, the perception of those wait times vary between pickup and delivery. But those two aspects themselves, I mean, if we think about recency, I mean, those are the last things that we remember from our most recent experience, right? How long did we have to wait, and did I get everything I ordered? So from a very practical standpoint, really focusing on improving the execution against the user experience is really paramount. And that hasn't changed, Mark. It's just overlaid with the macroeconomic factors that are a lot less outside the control of the grocers.
It's funny. It's in conversation with retailers, they're setting their benchmarks for next year, their KPIs. They want to grow from 3 to 4 to 5% of sales coming through their digital channels. And that includes marketplace as well as their 1P. But it's interesting because they peg a number, but what's hard to understand is, to your point, what tactical steps are they going to take in order to get those numbers to be a reality? And
So to build on that, Mark, I mean, if someone says, "Yeah, we're going to grow our goal is to grow 10% year over year online," what we would be then asking about is, what levers are you pulling, right? And how does a new customer acquisition play into it, along with improving retentions, and then correspondingly, how does that affect what you believe your average order value changes will be, as well as your order frequency? So you really have to decompose that to that level at least to develop more confidence in the reasonableness, I guess, of attaining that goal. I mean, obviously, we all need to have goals to stretch and aspire to, but at the same time, they need to be grounded based on some data points. And I think, we still don't see as much of that present, as opposed to, no, we're just setting a target and that's what we're shooting for.
I think there's one last question I want to touch on, and that's the pricing strategy, because I think you highlight something in the report, in the variation in pricing between 1P, 3P, and in-store. Can you elaborate on how that is affecting customer behavior?
Of the 25 banners, I believe there were 9 or so that actually had higher prices on their first party site than in store. And when we looked at third party, we saw some interesting trends as well. But most importantly, what we saw was price parity between third party and first party when that retailer ran a first party site powered by Instacart. So there was no financial impact on the price of products if you shopped on the first party versus third party. Now, that's excluding the impact of service and charges and fees and all of that. But then the retailers who were operating with other providers, like Mercatus, for an example, they had price parity generally between the first party and in-store. However, the average markup they had between third party and first party was about 14%. So you saw a very clear divide in the pricing strategies that these groups are employing, and it has some interesting implications potentially for building more volume for the first party, right? As well as building more profitable sales for the first party side.
So just let's double click on it. What do you mean more profitable sales?
Well, if you think about the retailers who are selling the products online on their first party at the same prices in store, and they're operating not on Instacart or powered by Instacart, they are absorbing a higher cost to serve without that price markup. Whereas those who were on, for the most part, platforms powered by Instacart were enjoying at least a little more relief, maybe 3%, 5%, to 5%, I should say, in sales that help offset the cost to serve. And we didn't see a negative correlation between higher prices on first party and in store with sales growth. I mean, the report provides more details to that. So we see that as an opportunity, and it builds on the custom work that Mercatus published earlier this year, which is, the opportunity to revisit our price philosophy relative to how we price online, as well as the strategy in how we employ that philosophy across first and third party platforms.
Appreciate that, David. Listen, folks, it's a great report. There's more detail in this document than you can possibly imagine. David, how can our viewers, our listeners, get access to the report?
Well, if they're part of your friends and family network, that is Mercatus' friends and family network, they should reach out to you, Mark, or Sylvain, or someone else at Mercatus, and I'm sure you guys will be happy to offer them a complimentary copy. That's an appreciation for your thoughts, leadership, and support for helping us bring this to the retailers. For those who maybe fall outside your friend zone, they should just reach out to me or someone at BreakMixClick and about the subscription options we have available.
David, I really appreciate it. It's great to have this time to converse with you. I really appreciate your work in putting this document together. I know a number of Mercatus clients who participated, who are anxious to get their hands on the report, and for those who would like to get access to it, we're happy to have that conversation as well. Go ahead.
Mark, I just want one little extra plug, which is, again, for whether they're Mercatus customers who are going to receive it from you or other retailers who get it from us or from Mercatus. Our goal from here is to use that to start a more meaningful engagement
Absolutely.
of conversation. It's not intended to be the blueprint for what steps you have to take, but rather it is providing objective, third-party perspective on the business, unfiltered, so that you have data points that serve as evidence to support recommendations that you want to advance and test within your own organization. So we understand and are fully prepared and excited to engage retailers in talking about what this means for them and how they can potentially move forward based on some of these insights.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you mentioning that, because it is objective data. And everything that you've done and we're in support of, it's about bringing the facts in what can be a very murky world when it comes to eGrocery, bringing facts to retailers so they understand what they can do to improve their business.
Yeah, and just one last thing. I won't give away the state secrets on this one, but
Yep.
The report even provides some glimpse into what share of total e-commerce sales, first party and third party, make up for these respective retailers. And for us who live this every day, it was very revealing. I was amazed by what we were hearing back in terms of the range, right? That we had. And again, once you start to overlay some of the causal factors and then can observe the outcomes in terms of the sales trends, it really starts to get you thinking about the business in some additional ways in terms of where are the opportunities for us to better engage customers while also better improving our chance to lower the cost to serve, or said another way, improve the profitability of this higher cost to serve business model.
Fantastic, David. Really appreciate it. Folks, the report will be available from Mercatus and from Brick Meets Click, and we look forward to our next monthly report, which will be out soon.